Canadian leaders head south. America's top diplomat heads north as Carney prepares for power. This is Now You Know. I'm Rob Snow.
Deeper than the headlines.
The answers you need to know.
This is Now You Know with Rob Snow on News Radio.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford is in Washington today. He's there with the Federal Minister of Finance, Dominic LeBlanc. Both are hoping to bring the temperature down in the trade war with the United States. But are they in for a warm welcome? That's uncertain, given that their host is this person, the U.S. Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick.
He needed to break some guy in Ontario who said he was going to tax American energy 25%. The President of the United States in the White House says, "Oh, no, you won't," and breaks him. Breaks him in what? By a tweet and a truth. And you think that's chaotic? You know what I think that is? I think that is the thank God we have a president who's taking care of us. Because if you were in one of those states and you thought your energy prices were going to go up 25%, and you said, "Where's the president?" and all of a sudden he came down like thunder to make that end, you'd say, cool. I'm glad that's the guy in the White House.
Speaking ahead of today's trip to D.C., Premier Ford was asked about comments like that from Trump loyalists who are claiming Ford's retreat on an electricity surcharge for U.S. states was a big win for Donald Trump.
You know, if they want to call it a win, whatever. It's they're playing politics. But here and there, what happened yesterday very clearly, Secretary Lutnick called me. I didn't call him. Put an olive branch out, and only a foolish person would decline or hang up on someone and say, "I'm not listening." We said, well, that's fine. We need a meeting, and we need it right away. He agreed. He said, fly down tonight, fly down tomorrow or the next day. We're bringing Minister LeBlanc with us and Ambassador to have that conversation, to sit down and see what their requirements are, what their needs are. I always say, when you have your largest customer, you listen to your largest customer in business. And we'll sit there and listen and make sure that we bring that information back and sit around the table. It's the federal government that's leading this, not myself. They're going to lead the negotiations. We'll have a very loud voice in that conversation, along with all the other premiers.
At a news conference in Ottawa, where Canadian officials were outlining $30 billion worth of counter tariffs on American imports, Dominic LeBlanc said today's meeting is about trying to find solutions to Trump's unjustified tariffs and avoiding any escalation in the trade war.
Certain products that are compliant with the agreement were exempted until April 2nd. All of that points to a conversation that we've been having with the Trump administration around getting to April 2nd, with the objective of obviously removing all of these tariffs that are applying to the Canadian economy. We will continue to maintain our countermeasures and increase them on April 2nd. This is no surprise to the American administration if we can't get to a position where their initial measures are all lifted from Canadian businesses. So the conversation tomorrow will be around lowering the temperature and focusing on the process that President Trump set up, where Secretary Lutnick has up to April 2nd to determine a series of global tariff decisions. Obviously, we think that they should respect the agreement that President Trump signed, the Canada-U.S. Mexico Free Trade Agreement.
While Canadian officials head south, America's top diplomat is going in the other direction. Marco Rubio is the United States Secretary of State. He will be in Charlevoix, Quebec, for a meeting of the G7 foreign ministers. Rubio says the meeting is not about the United States taking over Canada or making Canada the 51st state.
The president has taunted, if you will, Canada calling the 51st state, calling Prime Minister
What he
Trudeau
said is it
governor.
should become the 51st state from an economic standpoint. He says if they became the 51st state, we wouldn't have to worry about the border and fentanyl coming across because now we would be able to manage that. He's made an argument that it's their interest to do so. Obviously, the Canadians don't agree, apparently. But
Do you agree with that? Should they be? Are we going to discuss that, becoming the 51st?
well, that's not what we're going to discuss at the G7, and that's not what we're going to be discussing in our trip here. So they're the host nation, and we have a lot of other things we work on together. We defend North America through NORAD and the airspace of our continent together. So not to mention the issues of Ukraine and other commonalities. So we're going to be focused in the G7 on all of those things. That's what the meeting is about. It is not a meeting about how we're going to take over Canada.
But are you concerned at all about the reception that you might be getting, particularly of the event?
I don't know. Should I be? What do you know that I don't know?
Tomorrow's big political news will be the change at the top. Tomorrow will be the end of Justin Trudeau's time as Prime Minister of Canada, and Mark Carney will be sworn in as Prime Minister by the Governor-General at Rideau Hall. Speaking at the Dofasco Steel Mill in Hamilton, Carney said he's ready to sit down with Donald Trump, but only after Trump expresses respect for Canadian sovereignty.
And we're working for a common approach, a much more comprehensive approach for trade. We're all going to be better off. Workers here in Canada, which is our concern, workers in America, which is his concern. We are all going to be better off when the greatest economic and security partnership in the world is renewed, relaunched. That's possible. You have a new government, but the same commitment.
Carney spoke for about 5 minutes. He took no questions from news reporters. He totally ignored the news media, could be seen walking to the parking lot and jumping into the back seat of a black SUV. As for Carney's cabinet, it is expected to be much smaller than the prime minister's. We know now that Stephen Guilbeault will not be the Minister of the Environment. That's some breaking news. Trudeau's cabinet had 36 ministers, and 7 of them have already said they're not running in the next election. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. This is News Radio.
No question goes unasked or unanswered.
Now You Know with Rob Snow returns on News Radio.
With our friend on the right side of things, Michael Taube is back with us, syndicated columnist and speechwriter for former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Welcome back.
Hey, Rob. How are you doing?
I'm just great, Michael. It's great to hear from you today. It would seem that the American news media wants to learn more about this guy named Doug Ford. It's Doug Ford who's all over the cable news networks. It is Doug Ford who is on the front page of many news websites like the Drudge Report. It's Doug Ford who's, even getting profiles in, of all places, the New York Post. Now, I'll admit, okay, one of my guilty pleasures is the New York Post. I'm like hopelessly addicted to the New York Post. But in the New York Post today, quote, Doug Ford rode his notorious late brother Rob's coattails to success, taking over his former seat in the suburban Ontario heartlands known as Ford Country. I don't know if they call it Ford Country. I think it's more Ford Nation, but nevertheless, okay? Won't split hairs here. He doesn't share the same popularity his brother did with working-class Toronto residents. I would ask you, how accurate do you think that assessment is? I mean, did Doug ride Rob's coattails? Is he less popular with the working class than his late brother Rob? What would you say?
No, I don't think that's accurate at all. I mean, it's a line that certainly years ago people used at one point in time when Doug Ford decided to enter politics and became a city councillor, a one-term city councillor in Etobicoke, where he ran in his late brother Rob's old seat and then won it. And again, that was in Toronto City Hall. That line was typically used years ago, and I'm sure you saw it, Rob, and I'm sure some of the listeners have seen or heard that before. I think what we've learned over the years is that it was not accurate. That, yes, Rob Ford led the way, but if you want to even go further back, you can actually say that Doug Ford Sr., their father, really led the way more than anything. So you could use the argument that the two children rode the coattails of their late father, but that's not even accurate in itself. They all sort of forged their own destiny and their own path to success. And that's what Doug Ford has done. And certainly he was, I wouldn't say lesser known, but he was not as visible as Rob Ford was at one point. But that was more than 10 years ago. Now you can certainly say that he's created his own path, his own destiny, his own political legacy, if you wish. And no, a lot of those things are just not accurate. Although I would like to know where Ford Country exactly is.
Yeah, Ford Country.
Other than Etobicoke, I don't really know myself.
Yeah. It's Ford Nation, right? That's right. What he's thinking about. So. Ford Nation. Yeah, I think so. Let me run this by you. I've heard this on some podcasts, and I've had callers during our open line segment saying, from other parts of the country, say, I like Doug Ford. I wish Doug Ford was the prime minister. I mean, people have said that to me.
Right.
It has been suggested that Doug Ford might actually have his eye on Pierre Poilievre's job, that if, let's say, Poilievre doesn't win the next election, the knives will be out for Poilievre. They'll be looking for another conservative leader. And who better than the guy who's risen to the occasion here, kind of self-styled Captain Canada, Doug Ford? What do you think about that?
I tackled this not too long ago in a column for the National Post. And one of the things I pointed to is when he was asked several years ago, and again, obviously people's views and opinions and the circumstances and situation changes. But when he was initially asked, his focus, unsurprisingly, was on Ontario. And that was to be expected. He had just been basically elected Ontario Premier in 2018, and that's what he should say, and that's the correct thing to say. Any sort of comments that have been made beyond that point have kind of suggested the same thing. I don't know personally. I mean, you would have to ask him directly or people closer to him or his family members what he really wants to do. It wouldn't shock me if one day he decided to run federally, and he might actually go for the leadership at some point. But right now, and this is what I wrote in the Post, is that it's firmly ensconced with Pierre Poilievre. So I agree with you, Rob, that it depends on how the next federal election goes. Will the knives be out for Poilievre if he loses? If ultimately the Liberals hold on to power and Mark Carney is ultimately successful, there will certainly be knives out. It's just a question of whether they will all come pouncing at once and they'll be able to topple him over. But certainly, I mean, if Doug Ford is interested one of these days, he may choose to do it. He's still quite young. He's only 60, and he has time to consider this option. But on the other hand, he may be just as happy forging a pretty prominent and powerful legacy in Ontario. He'll be one of the longest-serving Ontario premiers in history if he serves out his 4 years. He may be just content with that. So I would say anything is possible, but as of right now, Pierre Poilievre is in a good position.
All right, when we come back with Michael Taube, it's Mark Carney Eve, I guess you could say, Michael. Mark Carney will be sworn in as Prime Minister tomorrow at Rideau Hall. You follow UK affairs. How do UK Conservatives feel about Mark Carney? Because my understanding is they don't think much of the man. Back with syndicated columnist and speechwriter for former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Let's talk about Carney in the UK context. I mean, you follow closely UK affairs and the British Conservative movement. What do leading Conservatives in the UK think of Mark Carney?
Well, unsurprisingly, Rob, they don't have a very high opinion of him. They remember his time as the Bank of England governor for about 7 years, and from 2013 to 2020. And they largely were not impressed with him. They weren't impressed with the way that he handled financial matters, that the way he worked directly with the government in ensuring that the economy kept chugging along. They didn't like his obsession with environmental issues or the far left environmental issues. Through his days in the past as with the United Nations and whatnot, they saw that he sort of kept the same passion about that, focusing on things like wealth inequality, a sustainable economy, and all the other language and nonsense that he has basically espoused for the past couple of decades. So not shockingly, they were not impressed with him. And I can't think of a British Conservative who's ever complimented him on much of anything. And if you look at the British press, and not only do I have an interest in it, Rob, I actually also get published in it as well through the Daily Telegraph and others. It is more vicious than anything I file or submit. My God, they, So they would crucify him if they had the chance. But seriously, it's really, really harsh to the point where...
I should say the British press has been tougher on Carney than the Canadian media has
That's
been.
What I
that's
was
for
going to
sure.
say. Much tougher. But again, that's also based on the fact that they even had more exposure to him than we've had in recent years. And for that reason, because he was more public in England and there was a lot of disfavor, that's kind of how it worked.
I do wonder, though, how much of this has to do with Brexit. Leading conservatives, Brexiteers, they Mark Carney warned that Brexit wouldn't be good for the UK, and I think there was a clash there, and I wonder how much of that might be at play. What do you think?
That's interesting. Yes, I think in certain cases you're absolutely right, and there are certainly Brexiteers who still have very bad memories or a lack of fondness for Mark Carney when he was the Bank of England governor. But there were also, to be perfectly honest, and you even see it now in the Daily Telegraph, the Times, the Mail, the Sun, the Express, et cetera, you still see those who were actually supportive of staying in the European Union. They were still critical of him too, and they remain critical of him. So I agree with you that that's certainly part and parcel with the dislike of Mark Carney overall, but I think it's the entire veneer. It's the overall package that they were frustrated with, where they just saw basically a left-wing economist who was critical of a lot of the things that they believed in come out and sort of lash out against various ideas. Brexit was certainly part of the equation, but it wasn't everything.
Okay, we only have about a minute left, but the late-breaking news ahead of the cabinet announcement, it's been revealed Mark Carney is kind of jettisoning Stephen Guilbeault is not going to be the Minister of the Environment anymore.
I saw that.
He'll have some kind of role in cabinet. I don't know. He's kind of a one-trick pony, if you ask me. But, I mean, what do you think of that?
I mean, certainly I can't say that I find any displeasure from it. He was a thorn in many people's sides, and he is. I mean, speaking of far left environmentalists, there's the classic example of it. Not just because he was with Greenpeace, but in general. So no, I mean, I think it's perfectly fine. Although the irony is, to be very quick, is that Guilbeault actually came out in support of Carney, who has rejected the carbon tax, something that Guilbeault was actually wholly in favor of. So it's kind of interesting. After all that, coming out and endorsing Carney and whatnot, he's going to be shuffled. So there you have it.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, we'll see what tomorrow brings. Thank you so much, Michael. Great to hear from you today. All the best. Yeah, bye-bye.
My pleasure. Take care, Rob.
That's Michael Taube, syndicated columnist and speechwriter for former Prime Minister Stephen Harper.
The Newsday panel.
Well, let's jump right into things. A lot of ground to cover today with Neil Brody, who's back with us, longtime conservative strategist. Hello, Neil.
Hello, Rob.
Yeah, great to hear from you, along with Gary Keller, Vice President at Strategy Core. Hello, Gary.
Great to be with you, Rob.
Yeah, great to hear from you today, Gary. So, look, I was going to ask you about Mark Carney's cabinet choices anyway, so why don't we just get to the latest news first, and that's that Stephen Guilbeault is not going to be the Minister of the Environment and Climate Change anymore. Apparently, some new role will be found for Stephen Guilbeault, who endorsed Mark Carney for the Liberal leadership, but he will not be rewarded with, you would think, the only portfolio that he really covers being Minister of the Environment. What do you think about that, Neil?
Well, it appears that if you are aligned more closely with eco-terrorists than you are with the UN Global Alliance for Net Zero, you're out of that position. There's an old adage in politics that, doctors shouldn't be ministers of health, soldiers shouldn't be ministers of defense, economists probably shouldn't be ministers of finance, and, Mr. Guilbeault has a long sordid history with the
tree huggers shouldn't be ministers of the environment, Neil?
No. You need to have some arm's length rational views of things. So it makes sense that he's out. Where he goes, I don't know, but I mean, let's understand he's out for the next 8 weeks, and then he might be back in. So who knows where this goes?
Okay. What's your reaction to that news? Steven Guilbeault, no longer Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. What do you think about that?
Well, part of me says, hallelujah. Hallelujah. I mean, talk about one of the most destructive cabinet ministers in recent Canadian history, and just doubling down on the Trudeau agenda that has killed jobs, killed growth, killed economic development, put us more at the mercy of the United States. But here's the other thing, is Mark Carney is desperately trying to memory hole the last 9 years of Liberal rule, of Justin Trudeau's policies, and he's going to try this trick with Canadians. Say, see, look at change. I'm the new guy, not the old guy. And Canadians can't fall for it because the same economic wreckers that helped to lead us to where we are today and put us at this difficult position are going to still have influence around the party. And that's why when people say, oh, Carney represents change. No, sorry about that. This is the fourth. What the Liberals are seeking is a fourth term of the Trudeau-Carney team, not some sort of new, refreshed face on the Liberal Party. And Canadians can't forget the amount of damage that these people did to our economy.
Okay. So let's talk about, I mean, if the reports are accurate at all, and you would have to think it's the Carney people leaking this stuff, a cabinet of 15 to 20. First impression of that number, Gary, what do you think of that number?
Well, let's be honest. This is going to be a cabinet that is in office for probably at most 7 days before an election call. And then, of course, cabinet ministers remain in office during an election, you know, in case there are any issues and they are needed to make decisions, et cetera. Okay. So look, this is a very much a caretaker cabinet. Look, I'm all for slimming down cabinet sizes. And again, I think this is side of the sleight of hand that Mr. Carney is trying to play here, that I'm going to have a smaller government. Well, he's going to have a smaller government for a week to use as a talking point in an election campaign. But make no mistake, Mr. Carney gets reelected, he'll have a massive cabinet for sure.
Like back to 30-plus cabinet ministers. It's kind of a 30-plus. Okay. Is that what you think is going to happen, Neil?
Yeah, listen, this is a caretaker government between now and the end of the election, as Gary says, once an election happens. Once the results are in, whoever wins gets about 30 days to form their own cabinet. And so whoever's appointed minister today has 2 months, 3 months in the job. And you need some people there in case something hits the fan in those 3 months. But you know, no offense to the ministers who have held these jobs, but you don't need a minister for seniors right now. You don't need a minister for small businesses. You don't need a minister for middle class prosperity. You need,
that was always my favorite.
You need finance, foreign affairs, defense, industry, transport, public safety, HRSTC, maybe a handful of others. But there's no environmental policy being made in the next 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks. So you don't really need those ministers.
Yeah. So that's a great list. So who do you keep around then? Give me some names, Neil. Who's in?
In the big five, you keep the people who are already there. Mr. LeBlanc stays in finance. Ms. Joly stays in foreign affairs. Mr. Blair probably stays in defense. Champagne and industry and end in transport. Public safety may change. I don't know what's his name, McGuinty. He's been in the job for 5 minutes, so it doesn't really matter if he gets changed out. But you need some continuity in those other files because you're dealing with live issues in those portfolios right now.
You agree with that, Gary?
Yeah, I'd say McGuinty probably stays in because he's been dealing with the American administration, and so to change him
out
on
the border stuff,
on the border stuff, to change him out, 6 weeks after he took the job, again, it would demonstrate chaos within the government of Canada in Ottawa. But I think those people are likely sticking around. They say Guilbeault has some other unnamed role. Maybe he's going to get the Chrystia Freeland advisor on U.S.-Canada relations type role that doesn't actually have any power or any staff or any ministry involved. But I don't think we'll see Chrystia Freeland in this cabinet, for example.
Stephen Guilbeault meets Howard Lutnick. I'd like to,
Stephen
be a
Guilbeault
fly on the
gets
wall.
to Washington to climb the Capitol building in orange pajamas.
Is Freeland going to be a part of the Carney team? Neil?
I'm betting no.
You're betting no, Gary? Okay, Neil?
I don't think so going into the election. After the election, if Mr. Carney wins government, there would probably be a spot for Ms. Freeland. She's got some skills. I don't think she's finance minister, but I think a role could be found for her. But before the election, I think she's a liability for Mr. Carney, just because of her personality and where she landed in the leadership. She can be a trusted advisor, but as somebody in the front window, I don't think it flies.
All right, be right back. I'm Rob Snow. It's our Newsday panel, and this is News Radio.
Now you know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
Here on our Newsday panel with Neil Brody, longtime conservative strategist, and Gary Keller, vice president of Strategy Corps. Well, Doug Ford and Mark Carney seem to be getting along nicely, and Doug Ford is speaking highly of Mark Carney. But a lot of people can't help but notice that Doug Ford never says anything about Pierre Poilievre, and vice versa. The two are never seen together. There have been reports of a rift. Gary, what's your sense of things? What is going on with this Ford-Poilievre relationship here?
I'm not going to speculate at all what might be happening here.
Let's speculate.
I think, at the end of the day, Doug Ford is the Premier of Ontario. Unlike Pierre Poilievre, Doug Ford has levers of power and the financial levers to do what needs to be done in the current, situation, the work that he's done. And Mr. Ford has made it very clear that he is willing to do business with anyone, anywhere, at any time, and he is, pretty occupied with that. Mr. Poilievre is an opposition leader. He doesn't have any financial levers. He can make promises, but he's not the one making the decisions about the economy. Others are making those decisions. He can only propose what he can propose. And look, if Mr. Poilievre wins government it looks like later this year, Mr. Ford and Mr. Poilievre are going to have a good working relationship. So I'm not putting too much stock in any of these things. I think that, if Mr. Poilievre does form a government, I think Mr. Ford and Mr. Poilievre would have a good, positive working relationship for Ontario.
We'll see stuff on Twitter of the two of them having lunch, Gary? At some grill in Etobicoke somewhere?
Mr. Carney's the Prime Minister. Mr. Ford's going to need, federal fiscal firepower, and only Mr. Carney has the ultimate lever over.
What do you think, Neil? What's going on here with this Ford-Poilievre relationship and these rumors of a rift?
Well, I saw a Twitter headline yesterday attributed to Doug Ford, the Interior Premier, that was pretty complimentary to Mr. Carney regarding Mr. Carney's ability to work with Mr. Trump. I don't think that's true. I think Mr. Carney will get eaten alive by Mr. Trump. But to your question, like Gary says, who knows? All of this is rampant speculation. Listen, there could be animosities between the two camps. I don't know. Mr. Chrétien and Mr. Martin had a well-publicized rift between their two camps, and they were two thought of liberals. Maybe that Mr. Ford is hedging his bets now that a Poilievre runaway win might be harder to attain. It could be that Mr. Ford, as Gary said, understands that Mr. Carney is or will be Prime Minister for at least the next 2 months, and Mr. Ford needs to work with him. Let's not forget the glowing words Mr. Ford had for Ms. Freeland during COVID-19.
Oh, he's even said nice things about Olivia Chow, for crying out loud.
A big heart. Yeah. Ms. Freeland called Mr. Ford her therapist. So, David Letterman used to have a segment on his late night show called Is This Something? So, is this something? Who knows? It might just be a politician being a politician.
Okay. All right. Okay. Let me ask. The Trump situation is a big issue for Canadians right now. No question. I just want to ask you very quickly some other side issues and how you think they might play, if they play at all, in an election campaign. Freedom Convoy. Liberals are still bringing that up. Pierre Poilievre brings coffee and donuts to the Freedom Convoy protesters. Do you think that could be something in the election campaign, Gary? Freedom Convoy?
I think the only place where people really bring that up as an issue is in the Ottawa area, right? You know, obviously a lot of people have memories of that, but I think other than, you know, maybe in some downtown Ottawa ridings, which aren't likely to vote Conservative anyway, it's pretty much a non-issue, I would think.
Neil, agree?
Yeah, listen, it's you know, there are some fragile souls out there who are, you know, scarred by having some trucks in downtown Ottawa. They will always keep that with them. As Gary said, for people in Saskatoon or Prince George, nobody cares about the Freedom Convoy.
What about the security clearance stuff, Neil?
Security clearance stuff, you know, that's such inside baseball. I don't think, again, the people who care about it, but is that a large constituent that will move hundreds of thousands of votes across many ridings? I don't think so. All politics are usually local, so it's how do you tie a security clearance to something somebody cares about in their day-to-day life? I don't see it.
Gary, on the security clearance, Poilievre in the security clearance, is that going to be an issue in the campaign that kind of follows him around? What do you think?
Liberals are certainly going to try, but guess what? If Mr. Poilievre becomes prime minister, he'll automatically have security clearance. So again, this is a non-issue that the Liberals will try to play up. But I don't think for most voters, I think people who are already inclined to vote Liberal are probably it's a driving issue for them.
All right, be right back. Newsday panelists are still with us. Neil Brody and Gary Keller today. But the Toronto Star is now reporting Mark Miller won't be in the cabinet either, the immigration minister. So that's another one. That's another longtime Trudeau ally. He was in the wedding party, for crying out loud. He's in the wedding pictures. That's so anyway, that's the latest. Guilbeault will not be part of the cabinet, and according to the Star, going to drop Mark Miller as well. Any thoughts, any reaction, or not a big deal, not a surprise? Anybody? Gary?
The wedding party is on its way out, and Mark Miller's reign over immigration policy. I think this is a vote by Mr. Carney, a vote of confidence or lack thereof in Mr. Miller's leadership.
Okay, that's agree, Neil. Maybe. Yes.
Yeah, I agree with what Gary said.
Not essential, I guess, right now.
And it's not a riding in danger, so he doesn't need the profile, Mr. Miller.
All right. 24 Sussex. Mr. Trudeau, in a letter to the Public Services and Procurement Minister, Mr. Duclos, asks Mr. Duclos to develop a proposal with options for a new official residence for the Prime Minister by January of 2026. Okay, so here we go again. Mr. Trudeau has never, as during his time as Prime Minister, has never occupied 24 Sussex, choosing instead to live more or less across the street in Rideau Cottage. This is like an evergreen Ottawa story. What to do with 24 Sussex. If you were calling the shots, Gary, what would you do with 24 Sussex?
Well, I actually recommended this to some Liberals way back in 2016 when Justin Trudeau had just become Prime Minister. And I said, look, nobody wants to touch this with a 10-foot pole. I get it. But the thing is rotting away. The chances of Mr. Trudeau ever living in the thing is virtually nil because of the amount of lag time to, renovate or do whatever you're going to do with it, right? And I said the easiest way to move forward on this is make sure that all other parties are at the table so that everybody owns a share of this thing. You can appoint an advisory panel with ex-prime ministers or ex-senior politicians from every political party. You strike a parliamentary committee, again, with all parties. They make recommendations. Then everybody can own it together. But at some point, we're going to have to make a decision what to do with it. The time to do it, though, would have been in 2016 when the economy wasn't in the tank, when we're under threat from Donald Trump and tariffs. Nobody wants to talk about this out in the real world. And I think people in the real world would just say, oh, man, there they go again, banging on about a house that none of us will ever see or live in.
Neil, what do you think? You get to call the shots. What do you do with 24 Sussex?
As a political football, this is up there with replacing the Prime Minister's jet. But as we saw last year, the Prime Minister's jet got replaced and nobody cared. So just fix it. A slight deviation to Gary's idea. put together the four ex-prime ministers who lived in 24 Sussex that are still alive, Mr. Clark Chrétien, Mr. Martin, Mr. Harper, put them together, give them about 6 or 8 weeks to come up with a plan because they're smart people and have time. I think it won't take them more than 6 or 8 weeks. They know how to get things done quickly in government because all four were prime minister, and just get it done. It should have been done a decade ago, should have been done 2 decades ago, should have been done 3 decades ago. Just get it done.
Okay. I disagree with both of you.
Live there, do it.
Yeah, I disagree with both of you. I say it's time to be finished with 24 Sussex. Let's just forget 24 Sussex. Bulldoze it, sell it off, make it a luxury condo site, whatever. I'm sure some foreign country would love to build a beautiful embassy there. And Harrington Lake in the beautiful Gatineau Hills is out of sight, super secure, and they have spent $11 million renovating the place. Just make Harrington Lake the new official residence for the Prime Minister.
Not a bad option. Not a bad option.
It's about a 10-minute drive from Parliament Hill. I'm Rob Snow. Thank you to both of you.
Great to be with you.
Have a great weekend.
Have a good day, Rob. Have a good day, Gary.
Yeah, you too. Neil Brody worked in the Harper PMO, longtime Conservative strategist. Gary Keller was around back in those days, too, for cabinet ministers. And he's Vice President of Strategy Corps. Talkback is next, right after the news on News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Back in business. Welcome to Talkback. 2 hours of debate and discussion on the big issues of the day. And today's topic is generational fairness. I want to get back into this today. Generational fairness. So here's a basic question for you today. It all kind of comes back to this. Do you think the younger generations in this country have been treated unfairly? Have they been treated unfairly? And by younger generations, we're thinking, people under the age of 35. Have they been treated unfairly? Are they getting the short end of the stick? What would you say? 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. And to try and dig a little deeper into this issue today, we're going to ask a series of questions. And whether you're over 35 or under 35 doesn't matter to us. We want to hear from listeners of all ages. But these questions, they all have to do with like big moments in life, milestones, if you will. So let's get at it. Give these questions some thought. Give us a call as we try to explore this idea of, have younger generations been treated unfairly in Canada? 1-833-668-2577. For example, this is one of the questions we have. How old were you when you left the nest? When you moved out, how old were you when you moved out? And you could say to yourself, I no longer rely on my parents for anything. How old were you? How old were you? And as a follow-up, how does that compare to now? And say the under 35s that you know in your social circle. Here's another question for you. How old were you when you could say, I have a stable full-time job, something I could see myself making a career out of? How old would you say you were? And, we might ask what you were doing at the time. And how does that compare to nowadays? And the people who are members of younger generations, the under 35s. Do they have what you would call stable career-oriented jobs? Let's talk about housing. When you bought your first house, how much was it? What was it like trying to buy that first house? What did you have to do to make that happen? And again, this is kind of a theme today. If that house is still around, I'd be curious to know how much you think that house is worth. And for that person who is under 35 years of age, how does it compare now to when you were trying to do the same thing and buy a house? And just a few more questions, okay, to get the conversation going. These are just kind of conversation starters. How old were you when you made two of life's biggest decisions? How old were you when you got married? And how old were you when you decided to start a family? And again, how does that compare to the younger people that you know? Say under the age of 35. I think that's plenty to get us started. I hope you'll participate in the conversation today as we talk about generational fairness, and how accurate it is to say the younger generations of Canada are getting stiffed, and that the opportunities and good fortune that older Canadians enjoyed, they will not enjoy. They will not enjoy the same standard of living, the same quality of life, the same jobs, the same housing, the same opportunities to start a family, at least not as earlier in life as previous generations. What do you think of that? It's been kind of bouncing around in my head for a while now, this topic, because this whole issue of generational fairness, this whole idea, younger people in the country won't have it as good as their parents or their grandparents. I mean, this as a political issue seems to have totally dropped off the radar screen because everything is being taken over by Trump 24/7. It's Trump and Trump and Trump. And this whole thing, generational fairness, giving younger Canadians some hope. I mean, it doesn't seem to be anywhere in the public domain now. So that's one of the reasons we wanted to raise it today. I will say this, not that everything is political, but it hasn't gone unnoticed that younger Canadians, especially younger men, are telling pollsters they're more likely to vote Conservative in the next election. While for the Liberals, they're most popular with the older members of Gen X, that's my generation, and with the baby boomers, people in that demographic. They're the ones saying, I want to vote for the Liberals. And that's kind of a big change because there's an old line in politics that goes something like, if you're not a liberal when you're young, you have no heart. If you're not a conservative when you're old, you don't have a brain. And, yet here in 2025 in Canadian politics, that's kind of been turned upside down. And it's the younger people who say, I like what I'm hearing from the Conservatives. And it's the older people who say, no, I prefer the Liberals. And some journalists have noted when they go check out who's going to these Mark Carney campaign events, a lot of gray hair in the crowd. One journalist even said it was like a geriatric crowd. But we just want to get a better appreciation today is just how different is it these days? How different is it making it in life? Younger Canadians compared to older Canadians living on your own, having a career, owning a house, getting married, starting a family. Please join our discussion at 1-833-668-2577. If you've never called before, just mention that to our call screener. We'll make your call a priority today on Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Generational fairness, the topic of the day. Have the younger generations been treated unfairly compared to the older generations? We have a whole series of questions about this. How old were you when you moved out? When you no longer relied on your parents for anything? How old were you when you were able to say you had a stable, full-time, career-oriented job? When you bought your first house, how much was it? What was it like to try and buy that house? And how old were you when you got married or when you started a family? How does all of this compare to what the younger generations are facing today? And jump in on any of this. 1-833-668-2577. Robert, up first in Calgary. Thanks for calling, Robert. You're on the air. Hi, Robert.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, Robert. How are you? How are you?
Driving in the snow and ice.
Oh, you're driving in the snow and ice. Well, we're finally getting some spring in this part of the country, and we're enjoying it. How old were you when you moved out? You said, I don't need my parents anymore. I'm on my own. How old were you?
I was married at 19.
Married at 19. Wow.
We had our first child when we were in our 20s, early 20s.
Okay. Early 20s. Okay.
Had to buy
By that
insurance.
time, would you say you already had like a stable, full-time, career-oriented job by that time?
No, I was working many hours through the summer to put myself through technical school.
Okay,
I got my aircraft maintenance engineering degree, then worked for PWA, and didn't like the big company. I was a flight engineer, didn't like the big company, so I went to a flying club, and I probably didn't get a real stable job till I joined the Calgary Fire Department in the 70s.
Okay. Your first house. Tell me about your first house.
We bought a townhouse and paid about $18,000 for it.
What year would that have been?
That would be in the 70s, just after I joined the fire department.
Okay,
And
so
we were
late
making
70s?
Early 70s, 71.
Early 70s. Okay.
And, but we were making about $400 or $500 a month. But I have, through my whole life, from then to when I retired, I worked 2 to 3 jobs to pay the bills and make ends meet.
Okay. Do you think the younger generations have been treated unfairly?
The only thing is, and I shouldn't paint them all with a brush, but a lot of them expect everything, and it kind of gets me when they're got pharmacare, they got the things that the Liberals are bringing out, that the kids, we had to work for that. As I say, I had to buy insurance so my son, when he got old enough, he could get insurance. So if they found something pre his age where he could apply for insurance, and he had it, they wouldn't give it to him. But I had to buy insurance to make sure he could get the insurance. So these are the type of things that we had to do.
Right, but you would say some, not all. You don't want to stereotype, but some, not all, maybe have unrealistic expectations. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. That townhouse that you bought in the early 70s, is that still around?
It's still there, and I couldn't say what it's worth. I would say where the district it's in, it's probably maybe $300,000.
300,000. Wow. Holy cow. Okay. Thank you. Good to hear from you. I'm always blown away by those housing prices, but I mean, everything's relative, incomes and housing prices. $18,000 though, David, $18,000 for a townhouse. Can you imagine $18,000 for a townhouse? Oh my gosh. Vicky in, when I do shows like this, David, he gets perturbed. Hi, Vicky in Halifax. How are you today?
Good. How are you, Rob?
I'm good. Good to hear from you. So Vicky's all grown up and no longer relying on her parents for anything. How old would you say you were?
Right now?
How old would you say you were when you left home, when you left the nest?
I was kind of kicked out because they had to move to the valley and I wasn't going to have that. So I had to get an apartment in Halifax a little bit before my student loans were paid off. So that was kind of a bummer. But I was 23 and I had an apartment on Creighton and Kennard Street.
How old were you, would you say, when you were able to say, I've got a career-oriented job. I'm stable now. I'm kind of on my way.
28.
How old would you say? 28. 28. Okay. First house? Buy a house? Ever buy a house?
26.
26. Wow, young. 26.
Yes.
How much was it? Just curious.
It was 101.9 and no other bidders. I had to negotiate because I wanted the appliances. I played hardball. Gee, have things ever changed?
What kind of house was it?
3 levels, no garage, but bay windows, huge master bedroom with an ensuite.
Detached house?
It was detached, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And it was like a few years old. It was very new.
Okay. Okay. How old were you when you got married or started a family?
Got married at 29.
29.
Started
Okay.
a family at 33.
33. Okay. Okay. Do you think the younger generations are being treated or have been treated unfairly? Are they getting the kind of a raw deal? What would you say?
I'd say somewhat, because the whole culture has changed. The whole shifting has changed. I think technology has really zapped their time, their drive, their energy, and they're not socializing like they used to.
Okay.
So their networking opportunities might be impacted.
So would you put more of the blame on them than, say, I don't know, the government or industry or even older generations? Would you say it's more their fault
I'd say it's a combination of population growth.
Okay.
A combination of wages are going up, and that's good and bad, but all the pricing is going up with it. And then in conjunction with the technology that's out there, I'm not going to get them off scot-free, but they certainly have a much more difficult time. I mean, if you apply yourself back in the 90s, you could make a go of it pretty easily. Now you're living with 5 other people just to survive sometimes.
True enough. Okay. Vicki, thank you for your call. Great to hear from you today. Yeah, 1-833-668-2577. Join our discussion as we talk about generational fairness on Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Join our discussion on generational fairness today here on Talkback. Eric is in Halifax. Hello, Eric. Hi, Eric.
Hey, how you doing, Rob?
I'm good, Eric. How old were you when you moved out of the house?
16, man.
16
years
Holy
old.
Cow. Where did you go?
I went to the land of opportunity, Ontario.
Right.
I had enough jobs to sink a battleship, and bought my first house, and when I was almost 60 years old. And I worked with the city. I ended up working with the city for 20 years, and that's all I've done since then when I retired in 2007.
Right. Okay. So, how old were you when you would say I'm on my way now? Like I've got the stable kind of career now. How old would you say you were when that was going on?
I was in my late. Oh my God, that's a tough question. I started with the city in '87, so I had to be about in my late 40s, early 50s, I would say.
Right. So it took you a while. Right?
Yeah. I did a lot of stuff in Ontario. I mean, I was a manager in the theater business. I worked in the wine business. I did it all, Rob. I've been there and I bought the T-shirt.
Okay. So when you hear, it's so tough for young people now, like people under the age of 35, it's really tough for them to, buy homes and get careers and really get started with life. What do you think about that?
Well, I think what the youth got to do today. First of all, they got to get a lot of education, because without education, you're not gonna get anything. I mean, when I first started with the city, I was asked by one of the supervisors, "Do you know how to start a lawnmower?" and I said, "Yeah, no problem." And I did that for 20 years as a skilled laborer. So as far as the youth goes, they've got to get their priorities in order, get all the education they can, because today's demands for work it comes at a high price.
Okay, probably good advice, Eric. Thank you so much. Won't bring anybody on right now. Our time is a little tight, and we want to certainly make sure the news gets on time. The news always gets on time. They'll cut both of us off if we engage in conversation right now. But lots of time to fit you in, of course. It's Talkback. Still 90 minutes to go. Join the discussion as we talk about generational fairness today and whether younger generations really do have it harder than the generations that came before them. 1-833-668-2577. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talk Back on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
We've been talking about generational fairness today, comparing life milestones then and now. How old were you when you moved out? You no longer relied on your parents for anything. How does that compare to these days? How old were you when you were able to say, I've made it, I have my career-oriented job? How does that compare? When you bought your first house, how much was it? How old were you when you got married or started having a family? How does that compare to what younger generations are facing right now? 1-833-668-2577. We'd love to hear from you today. We love topics like this here on Talkback. Kyle in Listowel. Hello, Kyle. Hi, Kyle. I believe we have lost Kyle. Let's go to Stephen in Calgary, first-time caller. Hello there, Stephen. Hi, Stephen.
Hello.
Hi, Stephen. Thanks for being a first-time caller. I hear you just fine, Stephen. Thank you.
Well, I love the topic this morning.
Well, thank you. Thank you for joining the discussion. How old were you when you moved out and you could say, I'm on my own now. I don't need my parents anymore. How old would you say you were?
Well, I grew up in Toronto, and when I was 14, I wanted to move out. My parents, of course, wouldn't let me. Yeah, I was 14, and so what I did is I stole my uncle's car. It's an old Chevy Impala, and I drove to Florida.
Oh, my gosh. When you were 14, you drove to Florida?
When I was 14. But I forgot that I had an uncle in Florida, too, and he picked me up and sent me back to Toronto, and he kept the car. My father paid for it. Okay, I'm not finished yet. Okay, when I was 16, I tried it again, and I didn't succeed. I became a regular at that Detroit border crossing.
You were able to get across the border at 14 years old in your parents' Chevy Impala?
Oh yeah. I even got stopped once. When I was 14, I got stopped on the Highway 401 by the OPP, checked me out and said, but you know what? I said, I'm sorry, I forgot my license. And he says, well, clean off the snow off your car, please. You can't see. And he let me go.
Oh, my God. Okay. All right. So, look, how old? Yeah, okay.
When I was 18, I crossed the border for the last time, and I joined the military. The U.S.
military.
I volunteered for the Marine Corps. They moved me and transferred me to Oceanside, to California for training in California. I did 4 tours in NAM.
Holy mackerel, what a life.
Yeah. I got out of the military when I was 26, 27, and I started cooking. I'm a chef now.
Oh, good for you. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you get married?
So, yeah, 4 times.
Oh, 4 times. Okay. When you first got married the first time around, how old were you?
Yeah. I was actually just before I went into the military, I was 18.
18,
and,
holy cow.
Yeah, and I had my family. Being Italian, of course, the family comes after you. And they came to my apartment trying to talk me out of it and take me home, but I wouldn't listen to them. So
Right. So would you say that the younger generations have been getting the short end of the stick? What would you say?
No, I don't think so. I think they've been...
You don't think so?
No, they've been coddled too much. They've been coddled. There's too much available for them. Back in those days, there wasn't much available for us. It was what we had, and that's it, unless we developed it. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Yeah.
Spoiled.
Yeah,
You think they're spoiled?
I'm 76 now, so I'm still going.
Yeah, okay. Well, look, great stories. Glad you're still around.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Thank you so much.
I'll be around for a while yet.
Great to hear from you, Stephen. All the best out in Calgary. Sean in Cambridge, Ontario. Hi, Sean. Yeah, hello, Sean.
Hello. Oh, hello.
Hi, Sean. How are you? I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good.
Good.
Well, my story's not quite as exciting as your last guest. Wow.
No stealing the parents' car and driving to Florida, nothing like that, eh? Okay. All right.
Well,
How old were you when you moved out and, you were like on your own?
Well,
how old were
I
you?
joined the Canadian Forces when I was 19.
Okay. All right. Okay.
So I never really did settle down per se. So I never ended up buying my first, like, an actual house till I was in my 50s, in all honesty. But, I was thinking of the various jobs that I had, and I got in a lot of jobs, and I'm thinking a lot of these jobs now require, like, university degrees and stuff, and I just sort of got into stuff because I could talk good.
Right.
Right. I learned a lot of stuff on my feet about computers and stuff. I mean, I bluffed my way into a job in a lab with grade 13 chemistry, for goodness sakes, because I know how to talk to lingo. I'm currently working in IT, and I don't have a university degree in computer science. I got it through college and night school, and I don't know if you can do that anymore, quite honestly. And
right. So how old were you when you could say, I've got my career-oriented job, I'm kind of on my way? Like, were you in your 20s, your 30s, or?
Still working on it, dude.
Oh, you're still working on it. Okay.
Well,
all right.
In all honesty, I would probably say in my 40s.
In your 40s. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because, like I said, I changed careers a little bit. I was in the military, and I ended up working for a municipality, and I ended up in I worked in the electrical area for a while, and then I ended up getting into computers. Like, stuff happens. But I think that when I was growing up, you could move around a lot more. You had a lot more mobility and the ability to change jobs. And
right. You felt that there were always going to be other opportunities for you, right?
I do.
Yeah. Okay. Now, on the younger generations and this idea that they're kind of getting the short end of the stick or getting a raw deal compared to people our age, what would you say to that?
I'd say yes, they are. Because
you would say yes. Okay.
Because I look where I'm working now, and they're looking at university degrees, and they're looking at university degrees for stuff that I could basically walk and do with a college degree, and everything's online, and plus, you look at the private sector. When I was younger, there was pensions and everything. I mean, we've been in the race to the bottom for 40 years now. There's no pensions. There's no benefits. There's nothing. You should be able to afford, like, I look at my younger relatives. They're making less money than I'll be making when I retire. It's horrible. So even they're working hard, and they're just not getting ahead.
All right, Sean. Thank you for your perspective. Join in the conversation here. It's Talkback.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Generational fairness. Let's get to Sanj in Calgary. Hi, Sanj. Thanks for calling. How are you? Hi, Sanj.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. You having a good day? Great conversation.
Well, thank you. How old were you when you moved out and you no longer had to rely on your parents? How old would you have been?
Well, I got a scholarship to Western when I was 17.
Wow.
And so then at 21, when I graduated, I spent a year with the family trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Moved to Vancouver and then couldn't get a job. I remember trying to beg for a job at McDonald's, and even they wouldn't hire me, so I was overqualified.
What did you study at school?
I did my honors in philosophy, and I was going to become a lawyer, but I couldn't afford law school at the time. So I thought maybe I'll get some work, and so I ended up getting a job at Blockbuster Video, and then working on the docks, cutting fish fillets, and then DJing at night. So it was like 3 jobs.
Holy cow!
And that was living in New Westminster in BC, and even then it was like there was nothing left at the end of the month. And then I got a record deal which happened when the whole DJing and music production paid off, and I got a record deal in Europe, and so I left.
Cool.
and lived in Europe for 15 years. So
15 years. Wow.
Yeah.
So how old were you when you would be able to say you were on your way? Like, this is going to be my career. How long did that take?
Well, I think the first year when I was there, I saved enough money to send back home for my family to put a down payment on a house. Back then, the house was $262,000, and my parents ended up selling that house for $750,000 back in, I think, 2014, 15.
Right.
And then I bought a house. I bought a house in the Lower Mainland for $800,000 in 2015, which is now I still have it. It's now worth over $2 million.
Holy cow! Wow, you've done well. You've done well.
Oh, yeah. I'm comfortable now, but I got too young. I'm an old dad, so I've got like a 1.5-year-old, and I've got a 7-year-old. And so I tell them every day. I tell them, I said, look, as soon as you say it's not fair, you're losing. Because that kind of mentality, like it's the world's never going to be fair for everybody. There's always someone that feels it's not fair. It's always been like that. It's nothing new.
But just maybe more generally speaking, do the younger generations have it harder than older generations had it?
Well,
do you think?
I met a kid yesterday, right? Who is from England, moved here when he was like 12 or 13, started a YouTube channel at 16. He's now 21, 22 with 500,000 subscribers. And if I ask him, do you think it's unfair? He does. I don't know what you're talking about. He goes, did you guys have YouTube when you were growing up? I said, no, I didn't have it. And he said, well, information's free, and I could sit in my home, create content. And he's like, I'm traveling all over North America, earning a living on my own business. And he's 21, 22. So it depends who like I said, it depends who you're asking. Because I know a lot of young people who are doing very well because there's opportunities available that were never available to me in my generation. I mean, a lot of the work we did was like blue collar, heavy labor. Now you can sit in your home on your computer, learn what an AI agent does, and go on Fiverr and sell your services. So for me, the underlining thing is average doesn't cut it anymore. So I think if you're average, you're kind of screwed. And information's free. You don't have to buy the Encyclopedia Britannica anymore. When I was a kid, I mean, the salesman would come to your house and would sell you the new latest.
Yeah, we had that in our place. In our place. Yeah, Encyclopedia Britannica. Yeah, wasn't cheap either, as I recall.
Yeah, now you've got YouTube, which I'm learning about AI agents right now. I'm 50. So I go on YouTube, and they're giving me the information for free. So for me, it's like the golden era. Like, if you really want to learn, you can learn anything. And now there's places like Fiverr and Upwork and all these different sites where you could sell your services and provide value in the market. And so that was never available. And you can do that from your home. No. You don't even need a degree. And you can do it when you're 16, 15, 14. It doesn't matter. And
really cool. Okay.
Yeah. So my thing is, like, look, it's always going to be unfair. You just got to be the hammer, not the nail. So, and it's pretty harsh. I know.
Great advice. Yeah, great advice. No, it's good advice. Thank you, Sanj, for joining the conversation today and sharing your perspective. That's what it's all about here on Talkback.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Comparing the generations, talking about generational fairness today, examining whether younger generations have it harder than older generations in this country. Kyle in Listowel. Hi, Kyle. Thanks for waiting.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I hear you just fine, Kyle. Go ahead.
All right, let's get started. I was 18 when I left. I'm a millennial. So my parents and my dad gave me $500 and said, you're on your own now. This is it. For 10 years of my life, so from like 18 till I was 28, I was working up north. Didn't have a place to live. Like, I was working I didn't pay rent because the company that I worked for paid for that. They had employee housing. My first apartment when I was in London, when I was 18, 19, I was paying $645 a month. I bought my first house only 3 or 4 years ago now. For $355,000, a wartime home, and I made the sacrifices of either I could be in Waterloo or Waterloo region and pay the extra X amount of dollars to buy there, or I live half an hour away in a small town of Listowel and save money and live comfortably and affordably. And I know some of the guys, my generation, they have a tendency to buy these $1 million homes because that's what they think they could afford, and then mortgage rates go up, and then they're downsizing and stuff. So I think a lot of people of my generation aren't living within their means, and they're living beyond their means, and I think that's catching them off guard. And then the other question is family, marriage. I don't have kids. I'm not married yet, but I'd hopefully get married within the next couple of years to my other half. But we don't want kids at all because that's just, we're content of just enjoying our life without kids. We like when people drop off our kids at our house, but the minute they're gone, the nice thing is I could just put my feet up and watch hockey or whatever, right? But yeah, no, that's where I come from. As a millennial, I wish I had it kind of like my parents, but you just got to adjust and make smart financial decisions. Like I pay everything cash. I try to at least, right? Like I try not to finance anything or have any monthly payments because, that's just, people don't realize that, right? So yeah, that's where I come from, Rob. Right.
Very cool. Kyle, thank you for the millennial perspective there. Let's go to, how about Manfred is on the line in Kitchener. Hi, Manfred. Hi, Manfred.
Oh, hi. How are you?
I'm good, Manfred. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for taking my call.
Yeah, you're welcome, Manfred.
To your show, and I think now it's a lot harder to get into housing than it was, let's say, 40, 50 years ago when I got into it. Okay. Tell me about when you first got into it. What did you get into? I bought my first house in 72, and I was freshly married, but I was married for a few years. I paid $22,300.
$22,000. Wow.
Yes, it was a raised bungalow in Kitchener, and I got $20,000 mortgage at a rate of 10%.
Wow.
But when you take $20,000 at 10%, that's what's $2,000 a year in interest. That's a lot less than what you would pay right now, even if your mortgage rate was 2.5%. So
I suppose
at that time already, it was housing creeped up a little bit each year. And anyways, that was when I bought my first house. So
and what were you doing for work at the time? What were you doing for work at the time that you could afford a house like that?
I was a house painter for a while, and what I did is I painted houses for various contractors, and I liked real estate, so a lot of times I took houses in trade when they couldn't pay me for my painting. And as I said, it was very simple. I remember in Stratford once, a builder was building 10 semis, and they were $14,000 with $500 down. So I said, I'll buy all 10, and I'll do the painting for free. It was so simple those days.
Wow, holy cow.
So
okay.
I got into housing that time, yeah.
Sounds like you've done pretty well, Manfred. Thank you for joining the discussion. Love to hear from you in the second hour, coming up right after the latest breaking news.
It's time to talk back
on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now
and have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
We've been talking about generational fairness. Welcome to hour number 2 of Talk Back. I'm Rob Snow. 1-833-668-2577. We've been asking younger generations, do they have it tougher compared to older generations? Have they been getting the short end of the stick? And, to try and explore this a little bit more, we've been asking questions. How old were you when you moved out? You no longer relied on your parents. And how does that compare to the generations of today? How old were you when you were able to say, I have a full-time stable job, a career, something I can make a career out of? How old were you when you bought your first house or got married or started a family? And how does that compare to these days? For people who are, say, under the age of 35. We'd love to hear from you today. Hour number 2 of Talkback. Join the discussion as we go to Mike in Calgary. Hello, Mike. Thanks for calling, Mike.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
Great. Thanks for another great topic. And I've got a lot of energy around this one, so thank you for taking my call.
Okay, you're welcome. Yeah. How old were you when you moved out? I'm on my own. Mike's all on his own now.
I was 18, when I left home and went to technical school.
Okay. 18 years old. 18 years old. And what kind of what were you studying at technical school? What were you hoping to be?
I studied instrumentation. Yeah, I really saw opportunity in heavy industry for trades in general. I had some great mentorship in high school, and that way through shop classes, industrial arts, which that's where some of my energy is going to go to, is your topic. But yeah, great mentorship and guidance, and was able to qualify for technical school, and that did lead to me becoming a journeyman instrument mechanic.
And how long did that take, Mike, to get from, say, when you started to kind of when you knew you had a career underway? How long would that have taken, do you think?
You bet. So by the time I graduated and then found work that in my trade to get it was another 4 years. So I felt what you're asking probably when I was around 21, approaching 22, where I had a stable job and was able to, be more independent.
You were on your way. Did you buy a house?
Yeah. 26, I bought a house.
26, you bought a house. How much was it?
Yeah. It was $109,000.
Was it in Calgary?
And this was another part of the equation is $109,000 at probably, I think it was 12% interest, which at that time the coaching I was getting is, wow, it's 12%, because a lot of the people I were working with were, had got their first homes in 20% or 18%, so 12 was a dream compared to even now where it's like almost free money to borrow and people can't afford to do so, right?
Yeah. So that must have been in the 80s sometime then, was it, Mike?
Correct.
Like mid-80s around there? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Was that in Calgary?
No, it was in northern Alberta. So that was in Fort McMurray.
In northern Alberta, okay. In Fort McMurray. Is that house still around?
It is, yeah.
Yeah? How much do you figure it's worth now? You bought it for $109,000 in the 80s. What do you figure it's worth now?
I bought it for $109,000 in the 80s and sold it in 2006 for $360,000.
Right. Okay. Did you get married?
So I did at 26.
At 26. Okay. Everything was kind of coming together when you were 26, wasn't it, Mike?
Yeah, for a while, yeah.
Yeah, for a while. Okay. And you started a family around the same time, or?
Yeah, 28.
28. Okay. All right. So with the younger generation, do you think they have it tougher than you did?
So this is where a lot of my energy is on your topic, so thanks. I think, can I jump right to the fairness part?
Sure thing,
Okay. I think as far as fairness goes, I don't think it's a fair. The table's not set nearly as well for them as it was for, I'm going to say, my generation and my circumstance and the geographical area. I'll say, what I was used to, and I'll say for most of Canada. Then I mean, we had great provincial leadership, vision thinkers, forward thinking. People at all levels and federally as well. And they were planners. They had a great plan. I mean, there was projects and, you look at the things that we owned provincially and nationally back then. I mean, we built CANDU reactors, we built refineries, we were the source of places. We were exporters of technology and things. Because of that leadership, that really solid leadership, and we don't have that now. We don't have the solid leadership where there's the forward thinkers. We've become so focused on individual things and not the institutions. That, like a previous caller said, that the institutions have provided great jobs with pensions and retirement savings and benefits and dental and everything now has to come out of the pocket. Along with that, I think a lot of people get sucked into some of the advice I got early on that resonates with me is this term of when it comes to housing and investing, this term of a starter house. I think that's just a bogus comment. I think it's a phrase that was designed by, in my opinion, realtors, bankers, and lawyers to keep you in perpetual debt for as long as you can. I grew up in areas where, and to make you not feel content with what you have. If you're in a good situation in a house that you afford, or a duplex or a trailer or whatever it is, what's wrong with that? Pay for that and do other things with your money until you're done with it. The whole philosophy of it's a starter house and then I'm going to get another one and another one. They never talk about a finisher house. We use this forever home thing now, I guess, a bit, but why are we not content with what we have? Why there's this philosophy out there that we have to just keep investing and
keep getting more stuff.
Debt.
All right. Very interesting, Mike. Look, that's our time, Mike. I really appreciate your call. Some great perspective there. Yeah, sounds like you've done really well. Yeah, I appreciate your call today, Mike. And we're off and running hour number 2 of Talkback. Join the discussion. Lots of time to fit you in here.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Have the younger generations of Canada been treated unfairly? Do they have it tougher compared to older generations? That's what we've been exploring today on Talkback with Danveer here in Calgary. Hello, Danveer. How are you?
Hey, Rob.
Hey, Danveer. Great to hear from you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
So the question about the current scenario, I think there are two aspects to it, like the social and economic, and actually the political as well. So, if you're doing a comparison, we have to pick up apples to apples. So far, like 1,000 entrepreneurs failing in their garage, there is one Bill Gates, right, or Steve Jobs. But if there are for sure more opportunities now. But if let's say we're comparing a plumber to a plumber, or the same scenario, then it's really tough. So one of the callers, the second caller, I think, she said she had a house at 26 when her career job was at 28, right? Even before that, she could think of a house and afford one.
Right.
But now, if you have...
You would say that's impossible now, right? Yeah.
Even if you have career job, I think you still have to wait at least 4 to 5 years to start thinking about owning a house. So that's the inflationary pressure. Right. So, and it's much to do on what happened in the last few years. So, over the years, the economists, they found that inflation was the kind of a poison pill for any economy. So they tried to keep it under wraps, around 2 to 3%. But what happened recently was it went up to 7%, 10%. I don't know, it was pretty high, right?
Yeah, it was. I think the highest was in excess. It was somewhere between 8 and 9%. The inflation rate at one point. Now it's not anywhere near that. Now it's back down to 2% now. But
the thing is that whatever damage was done. So when you're calculating inflation, they'll pick up the figures that suit them.
Oh, sure.
So they'll say annual inflation, right? So if you have 4 years continuous 9%, that is 50% higher prices.
Yeah. Okay. So when you do the apples to apples comparison, I mean, what conclusion do you reach for young people versus the opportunities that were there for the older generations?
So,
what's the conclusion?
How I think about it is it is not what I earn or what I do with the money. It is the standard of living. So that has deteriorated quite a bit. So it is more struggle, right?
More struggle.
So, to do the same kind of things, you have you have less time. Basically, when you are doing two jobs, you have less time.
Sure.
Now, one person cannot afford a house, which was easy 5 years ago or 10 years ago, right? So that's what I...
All right, Denver. Good to hear from you. Going to move along. Thank you. Let's go to Greg. Greg is in Guelph, Ontario. Hello, Greg.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, I'm good, Greg. How are you?
Okay, good timing.
Good.
I just finished my lunch.
Okay. I'm glad I didn't interrupt your lunch today. What are your thoughts on the topic today?
Well, I'm 64 years old.
Right.
Been married 40 years to the same person. We've been together for 45.
Wow.
We sent two boys through university, bought our first house when we got married 40 years ago. First house, $50,000. Year and a half later, sold it. Yeah. Year and a half later, sold it. Bought a second house for $120, and we've been there ever since, and it's worth $1.2 million.
Wow. That's pretty crazy. Okay. So you got married in what, your mid-20s, I guess?
No, I got married. I was 24. My wife was 20.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So you were in your mid-20s. Okay. And there you bought a house around the same time. Is that right?
Yes, exactly.
What were you doing for work at the time, Greg? You could afford a house at that age.
I've been driving truck for over 40 years.
You were a truck driver. Okay.
Yes.
You retired now, or are you still a truck driver?
I'm going to retire at the end of the year.
At the end of the year. Okay.
Yes.
So would you say that the younger generations have it tougher now than you had it?
Well, couple variables. I not trying to be mean or anything. I don't think kids have the same opportunities, or like when we went to school, everybody was treated the same. Everybody didn't get put, a lot of kids didn't get pushed aside as in today, through high school and such. When I graduated, everybody had a job and had an opportunity to get a job.
Right.
And everybody was willing to work. And, but you had to work hard.
And you think that's changed? You think that's changed now, Greg?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
I see a lot of young people, and I won't say where I work or anything, that come into our facilities, and they don't want to work. They spend more time on the phone than they do work.
Oh yeah, I've heard that. Okay, look, I've got to run. I'm a little tight on time here, Greg, but I appreciate your call. It sounds like you've had a great life. I'm Rob Snow. It's Talkback. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
We've been talking today about how different it is trying to make it in life. Younger Canadians compared to older Canadians. Things like living on your own, having a career, owning a house, getting married, starting a family. Generational fairness, and whether younger generations are getting the short end of the stick. What would you say? 1-833-668-2577. Back to the phones. Charles is calling from Alberta. Hello, Charles.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for taking my call.
Yeah, you're welcome, Charles.
I'm going to pass on all your questions about my personal history lesson and just make a quick comment about the younger generation affording a down payment on a house, which they can't. And I understand house prices are outrageous and wages haven't kept up. But it's what I'm seeing is they can afford $21 coffees at Starbucks, delivered, of course, because they can't walk 3 blocks to go pick it up themselves. They can also spend $4,000 or $5,000 on a ticket to see Taylor Swift. They also need 17 apps on their cell phone, which I'm not sure what that costs them a month. To me, it's priorities and work ethic.
Okay. On work ethic, do you believe the work ethic is the same? They work as hard?
I'm not. No, they don't. And I'm not going to paint them all with the same brush, but most of the ones that I've dealt with, they do not. Like some of your other comments, they're more interested in what's on their cell phone than anything else.
Okay. All right. So you just don't think they're not motivated, they don't have the right priorities. That would be your experience.
Priorities is number one, yes.
Priorities is number one. Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yep. Thanks, Charles. Kyle in Waterloo. Hello, Kyle.
Hi, Rob.
Kyle.
Are you there?
Yeah, right here, Kyle. Yeah.
How you doing today?
Just great.
It's a very interesting topic, and to be quite honest, I'm not sure how to answer it holistically or with the definition. Just given, I think, depending where you live, or whether you're 19 years old today or you're 35 years like myself today, younger generation is a very it's a cut up piece of pie. I agree with some of your callers about there's definitely some challenges that the youth of today or the young adults of today face that perhaps those a little older than myself may not have faced. But I think if you look back at history, we can't change the Industrial Revolution. We can't change industry popping up in the 80s or 90s for one reason or another in particular cities. But when I look at my experience and those of my family, I live in Waterloo. All my aunts and uncles that lived in Kitchener-Waterloo, they weren't born here. They were born in other places, and they moved here because there was opportunity. They
born in other parts of the country, born in other parts of the world. What do you mean?
Other parts of the country. I'm a white male, 35-year-old. Canadian, Irish blood, Newfie kind of idea, right? They moved here for opportunity. But I feel like a lot of the youth today, they go and get degrees in English and political science and philosophy. There are no jobs in those areas unless you're an author, unless you become a doctor. So for the 95 or 99% of people, your university degree doesn't get you anywhere any further along the line applying for what is an average or below average salary position. But you've now, if you haven't had the opportunity, been fortunate enough to either have had an RESP or, financial contribution for schooling from your parents, you might be having incurred that debt yourself, like me. I'm 35. I own a home in Waterloo. I paid my way through school, bought my first house at age 29. It's the house I'm in now. I have been in my career, but I went to college because I couldn't afford university, and I performed well there, and I earned a scholarship to move to another country and get a university degree. Guess what? That didn't get me a job. It got me an interview. I still needed to prove my worth and demonstrate my skills. And I spent 5 years in a job, Rob, making $55,000 a year with my student debts still there because there's not enough money to rent and pay student debt at that price. And this was back in 2011 or so. So about, we're coming up on 15 years. It wasn't until I took a sales role outside of my marketing degree, a lot of overlapping skill set, of course, but I did well. And guess what? I had to work 60 hours. I had a part-time job and a full-time job. And without working 60 hours for 3 years straight to clear off $25,000 of school debt while paying $2,000 to live, I wouldn't have been able to save up for a down payment on a house. But I went to school for a skill set that the accomplishment isn't just that I have a university or a college degree. It's that I actually have actionable, employable skills and a desire to work hard. So when I hear that someone when I hear someone who's 30 years old is upset that they can't afford a house, but they went to school for something that there are no jobs for, at the same time I went to school, but also, they're not good with their money. They get the concert tickets. I didn't go to those concerts. I didn't go out to those bar nights. I was a designated driver. I don't want to hear the complaint from my own generation that they can't afford a home. I didn't get help on my down payment. I didn't get help with school either. And it just irks me when people, it's like an expectation. You go and get a university degree and you live at home till you're 28 and all of a sudden you're supposed to have a job that affords you to buy a house that's 2 over from your parents. Are you out of your dang mind? Like, it's wild, the expectation that exists today. That's kind of my comment there.
All right. Thanks, I appreciate your comment today, Kyle. Thank you.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talk Back on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Here with David Smith on Talk Back. I was thinking today, we've been doing a variation of this call-in show on this topic for like a long time now.
Yeah,
David,
been a couple years.
For me, I think it's more than a decade when we first started talking about this, like generational divide. Back then, we used to talk about the millennials. Yeah. The millennials.
Yeah.
What's wrong with the millennials? Why are the millennials complaining so much? Did we stick it to the millennials? Are the millennials to blame for their own lot in life? And these themes emerge as the conversation goes on. Millennials were spoiled. Millennials, and we've heard this today, don't have the same work ethic that their parents and grandparents had. Millennials more interested in burying their heads in their phones, didn't know how to put in an honest day's work or didn't want to, or had unrealistic expectations, come out of school, want to rise right through the ranks. Didn't know how to pay their dues or didn't want to pay their dues. Or as Kyle said, maybe studied the wrong things. What did they think life was going to be like with an art history degree or a degree in Canadian literature? Should have become plumbers and electricians and life would be so much better. I've heard all of that over the years, but now the millennials are all grown up.
Yeah.
And right, we're having the same kind of conversation about your generation, Gen Z. I'm kind of mixing the two today. In fact, I learned a new term today, Zillennials. Have you heard of Zillennials?
Yes, I have. I am technically a Zillennial. I'm right on the bubble.
You're a Zillennial, so you're like the youngest millennials, like pushing, 30 sneaking up on you, Dave.
Yeah.
Right. 30,
yeah. Well, depending on who you ask, like I was born in 1997. Some people consider that the cutoff. So
you might even be a millennial.
First year of Gen Z or the last year of millennial. Depends on who you ask. So bubble generation.
I remember when I turned 30, I thought it's all downhill from here.
Yeah. I'm a couple of years out and it's already feeling that way.
So old now. But as the years have gone on and the conversation has turned from the plight of the millennials to the plight of Gen Z, it seems to me the issues are the same. And the issue that we're talking about today is, have they been getting a raw deal? Okay. Did older generations stick it to the younger generations, or government or industry somehow stick it to younger generations? Or is it, as many of the callers have suggested today, Gen Z, a little bit older? David, I mean, it's an indictment of your generation. You're just not willing to make the same kind of sacrifices and put in the same kind of effort.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that a lot. My pushback on that is about, what are we doing as a society? What is it all about? I was raised to believe that the goal, the Canadian dream, was if you work hard, put in the work, make the right decisions, you should be able to have upward social mobility. That's a technical term.
Right.
You should be able to have a better quality of life, or at least the same quality of life as your parents did. And we're the first generation for whom that equation, A plus B, is no longer equaling C.
Well, it's like the social contract has been broken, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's put it to our callers like Joe in Guelph. Hello, Joe. Are you with us, Joe? Hi, Joe. Yeah, go ahead, Joe. What are your thoughts, Joe?
Yeah, Rob, I was been listening to all the comments, not all of them, but a few comments that people said over the last half hour anyway. Some of them really good. Yeah, like I'm retired, and I'll give you just a comparison between myself and my older daughter. If I was to liquidate all my assets today, I'd probably come out with, say, $800,000. My daughter is 27 years younger than me. She got married. She bought a house. I think she was around 29 years old in Brampton. And that's when the prices were starting to climb out really, really bad. And 2 years ago, they sold that house. They bought it for $320, and they sold it for $900.
Wow!
And then they moved to Fergus and bought a house for $1.2 million.
Oh my gosh!
So basically, if you look at the comparison, reason why I'm saying this is because sometimes opportunities in life come by once, maybe 2 or 3 times in a lifetime. And the timing is very important. Very important.
Yes. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah, so basically, if she was to turn around and sell her house, she's actually, she still have, of course, you got a mortgage, of course, but even if they came up with $1 million, she's 27 years younger than me, so she ends up with more money, and I'm 27 years older.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
It's all about the opportunity and the timing. Timing is very important in a lot of things in life.
Okay.
Right?
Okay, yeah.
So it just go to show you, and some of the comments that people say, the one person that mentioned we live very very high, the expectations are high, not so much the older generation, the younger generation it is. Their expectations are higher. I see that all the time. I worked in the school system. I see it all the time. And also, there was one person out west mentioned something, and he hit the nail right on the head. He was saying society today, especially real estate, lawyers, and whoever puts that philosophy together, you're never satisfied with the home you have. That's why you become a slave to the system itself. And never satisfied.
Yeah.
Never satisfied.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
and
never satisfied.
That's a big problem in our society. Big problem.
Okay. Interesting. Look, anyway, we've got to run, Joe. Appreciate the call. Appreciate the thoughts. Thank you so much. Very interesting. Be right back.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talk Back on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Grant in Listowel, you're up next. Thanks for waiting. Grant, what do you think? Younger generations versus older generations? Who's had it tougher?
They all had the same opportunities we did.
Okay.
And I'm 76.
Okay. Right.
Plain and simple as that. And I base that on years ago when I was starting out, I worked 60, 70 hours a week just to provide for myself. And as time went on, I was fortunate enough to get a job that was a 40-hour work week. And I still worked 60, 70 hours a week for the rest of my life. And they talk about immigration, and in my view, there are all these wants, and people don't know how to divide wants and needs accordingly. I was very fortunate. I would go to older, middle-aged people and ask them for their advice, and then decide for myself. And that was, it was the middle-aged and older-aged generation that I counted on for guidance, not the banks or financial institutes. I went on there. They shared with me their experience and give me their advice in my circumstances.
Right. But you don't think the younger generations are being unfairly treated, or you don't. Okay, Grant, thank you.
Well,
and Hayden, well, Grant, we've got to run. I got to take in one more call here. Thank you for your call, though. Hayden. Hi, Hayden. You're going to be the last call today. What are your thoughts here,
Hey,
Hayden?
how's it going, Rob?
Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you.
Hey, so I'd like to share my story a little bit because, I'm
sure thing.
I'm 36 years old now, and I kind of I feel like I relate a little bit more to the younger generation because
Sure.
I know exactly what kind of they're going through. And with me growing up in Toronto, I graduated in 2006. I ended up post-secondary education just wasn't in the cards for me, and so my options were pretty limited. And I ended up bouncing around a few jobs. I ended up moving to Calgary with a buddy, and we packed the car. We left. We got job offers as electrical apprentices, and we left. So I ended up with that same company for about 12 years. Ended up staying in Calgary and made a pretty good life as an electrician.
Good.
But getting the younger generation, just get out of that stuck feeling is just something that you feel like it's not fair, but you also got to understand that they got to put in the work.
Okay.
And when you're not willing to make that jump, and you're always being told, post-secondary education is the way to go. That's the way to go. That's what's going to get you a life. It's not exactly the right word I'm looking
Maybe it's
for.
not the right choice for everyone. Maybe it's not the right choice for everyone.
And the example
sure.
of that is, my wife has a $35,000 piece of paper sitting on the wall that she never used in university. I mean, I stare at that thing every day, and I'm just, wow. But
But look, it looks like it's turned out pretty well for you. Our time is very limited. I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap it up there, Hayden. But I hear what you're saying. I think our listeners do too. And tomorrow is the Friday free-for-all. You can join us then. We'll follow your lead tomorrow.